I really do love it when the title of an anime is short, sweet, and tells you exactly what you are in for. Hey, maybe this show is about a guy called JoJo who goes on a bizarre adventure. That's what the title says. This anime is called Goblin Slayer. I wonder what it's about. Perhaps a guy who goes around slaying things? What does he slay? Why not goblins? Every once in a while, you're gonna get something like Hunter x Hunter, where you first have to decipher the title in order for it to make sense. Like, is it Hunter Hunter? Hunter x Hunter? Is it about a hunter who hunts hunters? Let's figure that one out over time. Though really, as long as we don't get the extremely long, obnoxious light novel titles, I'm good. Otherwise, for the show that we're going to be looking at today, it might be called, I Can't Believe My Sister Turned Into a Demon, and I Don't Want to Slay Her, or something. Demon Slayer is a much better title. It is short, sweet, and while you might think it wraps up the entire show's narrative in a nice little bow, so that it's easy to explain, it's actually a bit more complicated than that. This video was brought to you by Crunchyroll and viewers like you. Thank you. Demon Slayer is a new anime from the talented folks over at Studio Ufotable. It does a lot of things right, but most of these are not necessarily obvious. When we talk about shonen anime, there are certain characteristics, popular tropes, and tried and true narrative formulas that get used and reused ad nauseum. Each time with the story trying to find a new angle from which to pull in a fresh audience. But here with Demon Slayer, I can't rightfully say that there are many things narratively that the series does differently. A lot of the story as written is painfully shonen, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, because if you play your cards right, a well-written story can invoke the same feelings as similar narratives without coming off as a carbon copy or a stolen plotline. You can have episodes with characters training to become stronger, only to fight in a competition in an enclosed area to prove their worth, and then join some organization of similarly skilled fighters without being called a ripoff to either My Hero Academia, Hunter x Hunter, or the slew of shows in the genre that came before them. Even if all of these episodes follow the same narrative beats, we don't tire of them. There are enough new elements to the stories with just the characters alone to push your interest through to the end. This is a fine line that Demon Slayer rides very well. Episode 1 opens up with the introduction of our protagonist, Tanjiro, who is off to sell charcoal in the nearby town to help support his family. As he is a friendly fellow, he tends to spend far too much time helping out as many townspeople as he can. This makes him late to arrive home, too late to stop a demon from massacring his family. Everyone is dead with the exception of his sister, who is the sole survivor, having been turned into a demon herself by the attack. Tanjiro is then forced to defend his newly demonized sister from a nearby demon slayer, who was just following the trail of blood to their house. He probably should have killed both of them, but then we would have no story. So instead, he sees great promise in our young protagonist and a strange aura of sorts from his sister. Because of this, he decides to not kill either of them and instead sends Tanjiro off to train and become a demon slayer himself. Tanjiro as a character is a bit beyond your stale shonen protagonist. While he trains long and hard for the skills and abilities to become a demon slayer, there are particular portions of his humanity that he refuses to part with. Early on, his mentors look at this aspect of him and call him weak, as they should if their desire is to train him into a deadly warrior, but he eventually becomes a skilled killer, while at the same time showing massive amounts of sympathy for the demons that he is forced to slay. He's not going on a killing spree just to satisfy some kind of revenge plot against the demon that killed his parents, nor something as blandly simple as to become the strongest, whatever that could mean. He's motivated by his desire to protect his sister and to eventually find a way to cure her, if such a thing is even possible. As such, since his desire is to restore his sister's humanity, it'll do him no favors to forego his own humanity. The optimism displayed in his character is probably one of the things that I would point to as being unique enough from other shows and other shonen protagonists. There's a moment in episode 7 specifically when a side character, in an emotional rage, questions Tanjiro on how he could possibly know about the pain of loss that he is feeling. Then, with a kind and polite smile, Tanjiro just shuts him down. He doesn't argue with him or correct him, and he doesn't turn into a contest of who has the more depressing backstory. While other shonen protagonists can smile through the pain for a variety of reasons, Tanjiro's smile has a different kind of hurt and pain behind it. It's not something that ever consumes him like it might others. His sister, Nezuko, is a kawaii demon Imoto, and I know that I just described her as being a sister twice, but it's worth the extra emphasis. Her character, despite being mostly mute, is surprisingly communicative. Much of her actual communication since becoming a demon ends up being non-verbal, and it works pretty well. True, there have been several times in the story so far where they don't really know what to do with her, so they either toss her into a box or a coma for 2 years. But hopefully that was less because they don't know how to write a character like her properly, and more so only to further help bypass the training montage, or lack thereof. You see, every shonen has a training arc of some kind where our protagonist has to face some kind of basic trial that still nonetheless pushes their abilities to the max. That trial can vary from eating hair and lifting over at the beach to being stranded with your brother on an island somewhere until your master decides to come and pick you back up. What I liked about Demon Slayer, though, is that while it does have a training arc for Tanjiro, it doesn't take forever and a day. It's really just one episode, even if in universe he's at it for over a year. Now, on the one hand, it's hard to invest heavily in both his actions over that year and also the relationships that he cultivates with his teacher and the other guides who help him out because, it's just one episode and the lack of time doesn't help us cement these characters in our minds. But on the other hand, there's also only so much you can do with a training arc that hasn't been done before. So bypassing it in this way is quite refreshing. This is a great example of Demon Slayer holding many of the same tropes common to the genre, enough so that you can clearly see that it belongs in the genre, but not allowing that to bore its audience or to let the story become stale because of it. There's also a bit of hope in this show's future. Now, this is going to get a bit into spoiler territory, so I would advise you to skip this if that's something that matters to you. Now, I haven't read the manga yet, so maybe there's something in there that fixes this, but episode 7 of the anime is when they finally introduce us to the show's lead villain of sorts. For me, this was strange for a number of reasons. First, there are many unexplained circumstances to demonstrate how this villain demon went from being, our lead baddie by killing Tanjiro's family to just pleasantly living in a city far away. Alright. Second, it's odd that this encounter occurred so soon. The series is supposed to wrap up, or at least end on a narrative stopping point, after 2 cours, about 24 episodes, so I was expecting far more foreshadowing of this villain over the course of the next 10 episodes or so, as Tanjiro hunts other demons to find out the villain's location or similar. So for Tanjiro to just have found him now under these circumstances was quite interesting. Spoiler section over! You can come back now. Again, a lot of this series is just tightening up the popular tropes of the genre and presenting them in a refined form, which I don't think would have worked as well if it were not for Ufotable at the helm. Now, I was worried about this production going into it, because while Ufotable has made some of my favorite anime of all time, and certainly has some of the best produced from an animation standpoint, unless it has something to do with Type Moon like Fate or Garden of Sinners, then it has otherwise been fairly unremarkable. I still remember being hyped as hell for God Eater a few years back, only for it to become a series that most of us have now forgotten about. That's a thing. I think Ufotable just needed some time to figure out some styles that worked. In this case, Demon Slayer is far more style than substance. Now, usually, what I just said, that phrase gets used in a negative light. It's meant to highlight the lack of a good story. However, as I have hopefully showcased, that's not necessarily the case here. There is a story, and for what it is well written and engaging, but if you are looking specifically for something unique that hasn't been done before, then yeah, you might want to take a gander elsewhere. That being said, though, Demon Slayer is more of a refinement of the narrative rather than an attempt at reinventing the wheel, and it is noteworthy for just how well it accomplishes that. But that is just up to present day and what we have seen so far. There's still quite a bit to go, and this has only been my first reaction to the series. Maybe the story will surprise us and turn into something quite different from what I am expecting. Time will tell. Thank you for joining me in this quick discussion. There will be streaming links in the description should you require them, brought to you by the wonderful sponsor of this video, Crunchyroll, and the awesome people over there. Please also let me know down in the comments what else you have been following this season, and hopefully we will get to talking about it in a future video, potentially a wrap-up for the season, as that is rapidly approaching. Lastly, a big thank you to all of my patrons who make these videos possible, and until next time, watch more anime. Getting close without touching the lens. Good. And stay frosty, everyone.